All right. Well, it is 11 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Edens. I'm the program coordinator for the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education. And I wanted to welcome you to today's webinar, How Can EE Help Establish a New Normal Coming Out of the COVID Crisis? And we just appreciate you spending the next hour with us. And before I introduce our great speakers today, I just wanted to share a little bit about the Colorado Alliance for Environmental Education. If you're not familiar with us, our mission is to advance environmental education in Colorado by fostering collaboration, mobilizing support, and driving excellence. And so we do this through a network of partners throughout the state. And together we reach about 800,000 learners throughout Colorado. And one way that we hope to drive excellence in the field is through this monthly webinar series. And we try to choose topics of interest that are relevant to the environmental education community. And our goals are to share and spark ideas, to help everyone improve their practice, and also just to connect with one another, especially in this kind of virtual heavy time. These are great ways that we can connect with one another. A couple of upcoming events I wanted to share with folks. Some of you or many of you may have participated already in our COVID-19 response conversations, but those are still ongoing. So I believe it's every 2 weeks, and we have a calendar up on our website. But these are a great way to connect with other practitioners, educators, administrators, executive directors around professional development, sustaining operations through this pandemic, and adapting program models. So it's a great way to share information and just kind of pool our best thinkers together. I also did want to mention, if you haven't seen the announcement, we did change our Advancing EE conference to a virtual format, and that's going to be on September 17th and 18th. And we are still working out some of the details just about the schedule and the format for that. But if you were already registered for the conference back in April, you should have received an email with a button that you can click to modify your registration to the virtual format, or to cancel if you're no longer able to attend. So. And feel free to email us or reach out to us if you have any questions about that. And then the last thing I want to mention is just we recently put out some guidance with the North American Association for Environmental Education on reopening schools and how EE fits into that. And we're really trying to get organizations and even individuals to sign on to a letter to Governor Polis. We have a press release also on our website. So please take a look at that. That's definitely very important, and we hope that you can help us, show the support of EE around Colorado for that. I'm sure everyone on this call is an expert on Zoom by now, but just a couple best practices. We would love for you to just keep your lines muted while others are speaking. I think that there's going to be a chance for conversation and discussion throughout our hour together today. So feel free to unmute yourself at that time, but it's always helpful to reduce that background noise if you can keep yourself muted. You can always use the chat function to send any questions to presenters or to me if you're having technical issues, or just to share resources or ideas with one another. Again, that's a great way to connect throughout the webinar today. And then again, we'd love for you to chat in your name, organization, where you're joining us from, just so we get an idea of who's here today. And then one final note is that I am recording this, and you will be receiving the link to the recording. And so just so you know, you don't have to take copious notes, that you can always look back later for things. All right, before I introduce Rob and Martin, I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement and recognition of racial injustice. So one way that we can support equity is by beginning our time together by acknowledging our history of oppression that is still continuing today. It's important to remember that what we know as Colorado was the traditional home of the Apache, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Pueblo tribes, the Shoshone tribe, and the Ute Nation. And historically, environmental education has been tailored to white communities, and the contributions of Black, Indigenous, and people of color are often excluded from our narrative. Black, Indigenous, and people of color have vibrant, rich histories and cultures that contribute to our field. And we all have the responsibility to continue working to change the systems that continue to allow injustice and inequity to exist. All right, so without further ado, I want to introduce our awesome speakers for today. First, we have Martin Ogle. And Martin received a BS and MS degrees in wildlife biology from Colorado State University and Virginia Tech. He was chief naturalist for the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority from 1985 to 2012. In 2010, he was awarded the Krupshaw Award for Non-Traditional Teaching by the Washington Academy of Sciences for outstanding teaching in informal and non-academic settings. And in 2012, he received the Arlington Green Patriot Award for outstanding work in sustainability. Martin moved to Colorado with his wife Lisa and his twins Cyrus and Linnea in 2012 and started his own education and consulting business, Entrepreneurial Earth, LLC. And he began contracting with Lafayette Open Space as their education coordinator in 2013. And Martin was born and raised in South Korea. And we also have Robert Burdine, sorry, Rob. And Rob received a BS in Environmental Science from Bowling Green State University in 1998. Rob has worked for several open space programs across Colorado since 1999 and is currently the Open Space Superintendent for Lafayette, Colorado. In 2020, Rob managed the development of the Nature Kids Discovery Zone, a Colorado Lottery Starburst Award-winning project providing access to trails, nature, and businesses in the midst of Old Town Lafayette, where some of the most diverse neighborhoods in Boulder County and the state of Colorado exist. Rob was born and raised in the coal mining hills and steel belt north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. With the Beaver River a few blocks away and miles upon miles of deciduous forest to explore, Rob's love for the outdoors began at an early age. Moving west in 1999 with wife Cynthia, together they share 3 kids, Lacey, Caden, and Maggie, and own a dance studio in Boulder. All right, and I will pass it on to you all.
Okay, well, I'm going to share the screen here for our presentation. And give me 1 second. Okay, should be up now.
Yeah, looks great.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And Rob and I are going to try to go through this presentation as quickly as we can, because what we intend it to be is a case study to get our minds thinking about this question about how EE can become more and more relevant here, especially with COVID, but regardless, how can we become more relevant? And we're obviously in a changed and continually changing world, and we seem to be in a time where there might be opportunities for new normals that didn't exist before. One thing that I'm sure everyone is observing is that there's just tons more people outside, and sometimes just walking and biking, but really doing things that we would all like to encourage people to do beyond that as well, like gardening and fishing and outdoor exploration. So it's a good time to think about all this. Obviously, EE, like many other professions, is expanding online resources, and it's a necessity and it's a good thing. But in the middle of this, there is a lot of concern for EE like other professions. I forgot the exact quote that we heard the other day in a CAEE board meeting about what very high percentage of EE organizations could be in danger in the coming year. So it's a real concern. And beyond just the concern of each individual organization, the concern is, can EE use this opportunity to survive through becoming more relevant? So we'd like to share this brief case study with you that Rob and I have been thinking about and talking a lot about recently. And we'll introduce you something we're calling a new outdoors movement. It includes understanding principles of life in the outdoors and then applying that to what we're calling an all careers initiative, where we feel like everyone in our country should become more environmentally literate, but not just for its own sake, but for the sake of creating an entirely green economy. So I'll return to some of those in a little bit, but Rob's going to tell you a little bit about open space and parks and a few things we're doing. So Rob, the screen is up. And,
yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I'm going to take over for a few slides and just talk a little bit more about Lafayette open space properties, some of the things we do and have available to us here in this town to connect people to the land where they live. And a lot of it's what drew me here to Lafayette to manage open space. We have two local taxes here, 1/4 or 1%, that were citizen initiated, citizen approved to provide us with these properties and experiences for our community. And they are quite a diversity of experiences here in a small town of about 30,000. We have very active agriculture, both traditional and organic farming. We engage our community through CSAs and the annual farm events that we host at several properties. We have a lot of protected migration corridors for wildlife movement. Coal Creek and Rock Creek here, both visible on the screen. Coal Creek is very wooded and shady area in town, whereas Rock Creek is out on the plains, more of a prairie experience. And we have a very active trail system where we try to connect our community through lots of different opportunities through our trail system throughout the entire community. Go ahead, Martin, next. Lafayette Parks is a little different. It's a more intensive use. Our parks are more human-generated interests, but they're also very important community amenities. They help provide buffers between our natural areas and open space properties. But the distinct difference in use in parks, more tense, land management, as well as active recreation. Next. So as you can see, a lot of our properties are dispersed throughout the community with a nice buffer we share with Boulder County on the east side of town, the Two Creeks open space, and the Coal Creek Trail, Rock Creek Trail, both connect our communities to the east and west in Erie and Louisville. We also have a lot of recreation available in the heart of town around Wanaka Lake and the Greenlee Preserve and our Thomas Open Space Organic Farm. Hard to connect the community through trail systems throughout, as you can see in red. It's one of our goals. We have climate goals here in town, and we're trying to be more of a multimodal transportation system with a lot of options off-road for our citizens to get places throughout Lafayette. Next. So one of the things we do in Lafayette is host a birding event the first of each month. It's called Lafayette Birds. So the first Saturday of each month, we bring a group of people out with volunteers, and we do bird watching at Greenlee. We do some insect hikes along the trails around Wanaka Lake with our community. And in 2019, we were named the first bird city in Colorado. So it's a distinction to Lafayette here. We use that word birding as a verb, not just a noun. It's something that we do as a community. We like to share a lot of what we do through the art community as well. And they're a big part of what we do in our programming, arts and culture. So we do a lot of observation and art in our programming here as well. Next. So in Lafayette, understanding how our community and our land are one, and the ecosystem and the economy all works together is something that Martin and I are striving to help our community understand through additional programming. Next. Environmental literacy is a basis for our green economy and healthy human relationships. And one of the things we're trying to do is environmental literacy throughout our community in all walks of life, not just in our land management, but also with our planners, with our public works department. Currently, right now, they're working on things like dog permitting, in the planning department. And Public Works, they help us design our trails as we go through floodplains. So having environmental literacy in all these careers is a big deal for us in our community as a city, but also we want all of our businesses to be a part of that. Next. And you all can be a part of that as well as we're working through this. After we go through the rest of these slides, we want to hear from you on how all this comes together in your minds as well. Next. So together, Martin and I put the story together of people in the land in Lafayette and how those relationships have been highlighted through the years. And we did that through a walking tour around Wanaka Lake. It's one of our most popular areas for recreation, as well as bird watching and passive recreation at Greenlee. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here. Next. So with this walking tour around Wanaka Lake, we provide a little bit of a combination of local and natural history together in the land in one place. We went from a strong coal mining town here in Lafayette to a climate leader a little under 100 years. But this particular granary came from the original Wanaka farm, and it was moved out next to Wanaka Lake to preserve its history in our town. Next. So the earliest settlers in Lafayette, after the indigenous peoples, all kind of migrated to what was known as Wanaka Pond. So they probably followed those indigenous peoples to where water existed. And that Wanaka Pond grew into Wanaka Lake, where one of the first early power plants was built between the Mississippi and Ogden, Oregon. And it was a coal-fired plant right on the banks of Wanaka Lake here. So early on, go ahead, yes, go ahead. Another thing that we highlighted on our walking tour is 40 North. We came together with the art community. We had this sculpture placed out on site on our organic farm. And the 40th parallel has a lot of cool, interesting things that I researched through the years. It's been the dividing line. If you're not familiar with 40 North, it was the dividing line between Kansas and Nebraska. And because of conflicting views between pro-slavery and free state forces in the Kansas Territory, it's created one of the root causes of the Civil War. And that 40 North now is a dividing line between the states of Kansas and Nebraska still today. It's also goes across the campus of Columbus, Ohio. It goes downtown Boulder, Ohio, through Indianapolis, and passes through Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So just a little bit of more interest on 40 North and what it is. Next. And here's a picture of the sculpture that's actually on site now at Thomas Farm in Lafayette. So really, maybe this compass is a look into our past with an eye on the future, just like, you know, Lafayette is doing with the way we're looking at our climate initiatives. Next.
Great. Well, I think this is where I take over again, and this is another page in our self-guiding tour there, and you can see that we're really setting up this constant interplay between understanding human systems as part of natural systems. And with energy, for instance, we've been working with the Centaurus High School Engineering Department to take energy field trips around Lafayette. Here they are looking at the clinkers, the slag that came out of that coal plant you saw earlier. And we're able to and do bring in all the natural history of what coal swamp is and when the time period was. Talk about the coal mines that were here in Lafayette. All those black outlines you see are the outlines of the coal mines undermining just about all of Lafayette. And right where that, right where the boathouse is now and the playground, et cetera, was this big power plant. So it allows us to really fill out a great story for these high school students. And they bring in the agriculture, and the Historical Society has a multitude of historical photos that we share. And here's a picture of the Thomas barn, and we also have the solar array there. And one of the exercises we do is to get the students to calculate what area of Lafayette would have to be covered with solar panels to take the place of the Valmont power plant, which is in Boulder. And they're astounded to find that it would take about a 1.5 miles square. But then we really have been expanding a lot upon that. That all happened about 4 or 5 years ago. But most everyone on the call here knows of Richard Louv and Last Child in the Woods. And it's a big part of what we do as environmental educators. We want to get kids outside and people of all ages outside. But you may also know that he wrote a book in 2012 called The Nature Principle. And in that book, he says, yes, we have to get kids outside, but we have to have a 21st century story. And he's borrowing from Thomas Berry here. And then really says, not in these words that I use, the all careers, but you can read it in there. He's saying we need to connect our understanding of the environment with anything a young person might do. And I wholeheartedly agree and feel like this is the link that makes us most relevant going forward from this point. This is just an example of some of the case studies we used. Professor David Orr, who was on the board of the Alliance Center, where CAEE is based, by the way, did this talk in 2015. And he stressed that careers in renewable energy were important, but he essentially said that everyone has to be on board. And he gave a lot of examples in the talk, but said that a green economy is only green if everything we do is green. So we go through examples like how energy works in human and natural systems and say, how are we going to apply this to different kinds of careers that you have? So we've had these indoor sessions where we use the energy bike to even just get into energy basics, but then talk about how this applies to various careers. We bring out biomimicry examples, and not just energy, but in all sorts of things. This is one of my favorite case studies we use, where in Vermont, they're actively looking to divert urine streams for use of fertilizer, and look it up. It's a fantastically in-depth effort. And kids are quite amazed to see that not only this happens, but in Amsterdam, Holland, it's well developed to the point where they have a company called Green Urine that literally farms this out to farms around Amsterdam, because they'd already proved that it works on their green roofs, which they had already been leading the world in. So anyway, here's one slide with a bit of verbiage. I just want you to come away with a real, we need someone to mute their button there. The overview is that we want to make explicit connections between environmental knowledge and concern on one hand and all careers. Not just the small segment of the economy made up of environmental careers as we presently understand them. I'll let you just kind of read through, that we're trying to empower and inspire and give specific knowledge to, but we do have some, meat on the bones of this idea. So Rob and I had discussions on this 4 years ago already, and we regularly bring this into our youth core sessions, both indoors and out. And we've done some community talks. This title, Making a Living in a Life, is from Richard Louv's book with his permission. And it's a new view of environmental careers where, in fact, all careers are environmental careers. Then the last part here, before we move on to discussion, is that just in the last 3 or 4 months, just like you all, we've been actively saying, so what do we do now, of course? And one of the projects that fortuitously we had on board already was the creation of this mini education station we call the Shack, and the native plant garden that we're developing there. And here's a quick view of the interior. It's just a large, attractive shed, but it's allows for quite a bit of information. But in that shack, we not only have local natural history, but we're starting to show these symbols that stand for different principles of life, and then connecting them with careers for people of all ages, but especially if we get young people in there. And we're starting to populate this binder with examples of companies that are specifically using these environmental principles to make their work green. So I pitched to Rob, and he concurred, and we've developed this new outdoors movement where obviously we're trying to get people outside for the benefits that we usually and always talk about of greater health and getting away from screens and stress relief and all that. But as you can see on here, addressing our climate goals specifically, and starting in on this all careers as a theme of education. And so this is just a small step, but I think a significant step in that we're explicitly trying to make these connections to become much more relevant to our community, if nothing else, because we're going to feed into citizens' ability to address the climate goals that we've already developed. So that's it for now. Here's one of my favorite pictures to share with you. And yeah, at this point, I really did want to just really open it up for any discussion, and that certainly can be questions of us, but it could easily be your own ideas and thoughts on this whole body of knowledge we're bringing up here today. So Lisa, you can take that and moderate it in any way, shape, or form you wish.
Great. Yeah, I would just say that if folks want to unmute themselves or turn on their cameras, they can certainly ask questions and we can have discussion. That's probably the easiest. But also if you want to chat in a question, that's great as well.
Lisa, will you look at chats, but everyone do feel free to say things live because there's not a huge number of us here.
Yeah, I think people can feel welcome to unmute themselves, but I'll take a look at the chat too. I don't see anything yet.
Okay.
Martin, I'm curious, are there any other cities or places that are doing this sort of thing, or are there any other models or things that you've looked at around even the country or Colorado?
Well, I have looked, and I'm sure there's specific examples in schools and things that I would have easily missed, but the only large-scale thing I know of is that the California Department of Education, in their blueprint for environmental literacy, makes many references, and they're pretty powerful ones too, to saying we need to connect environmental literacy with the whole economy. So they're a leader, as they often are. Last spring, before COVID hit, Governor Polis was almost definitely going to speak at Fossil Ridge High School in Fort Collins, where one of the big themes is this all careers idea. And he was going to, make that point in what is already an amazing student conference. So there's a smattering, but it's just starting up as far as I can tell.
Great, thanks. And it looks like, Hillary, do you have a question?
I do. I'm thinking about how our economies are so tied to consumption and competitiveness, and just trying to think about if you all thought there was a need for a reassessment of needs. I felt like through the past few months, I'm finding that my needs have shifted a little bit, just on an individual level, and I'm just wondering how any of that factors in to this and the all careers approach.
Well, I'll chime in first, but that's a good one to throw open to everyone, of course. And Rob, you can come in after me if you like as well. Well, I completely agree. It's the consumption of energy and materials and all the results of all that are causing us to be unsustainable. So fundamentally, we'll be using less and in different ways materials and energy going forward. So how do we contribute to that? Well, one of the environmental principles we have is natural selection. So some people might think of that as competition. It's a real part of the world. But we also have right next to it symbiosis and endosymbiosis, and that's not nearly as well understood in environmental reality. And once we get more people understanding that our world is both, it's not just one, it, just like natural selection, inexorably led to the industrial the hyperbolic industrial revolution. New realizations breed new actions. So that's one quick example, but I think the whole panoply of environmental knowledge that we offer as it becomes more part of society is going to shift those kinds of needs and wants and desires.
Yeah, and I've seen on a local level, I mean, you guys have all seen it as well. There's more dumpsters in everybody's neighborhood right now than ever before. The call to stay at home has changed a lot of mindsets. People are cleaning their houses out, and a lot of times that's replaced with new. So we worry about that a little bit. Here in Lafayette, one of the things that we've been really encouraging is, we're told to stay at home during these times to help protect people. So how can we get outside and do things during that time? So gardening is a big thing that we're trying to push here locally. Or visiting places, open spaces in your neighborhood that you never even knew existed, or just things that locally that you weren't as familiar with, but now you can go out and explore. So those are what we're encouraging people to do here locally. The big thing is gardening. Growing your own vegetables helps with sustainable food production.
Great, and it looks like we have another question in the chat. I'm curious as to your thoughts on adult education opportunities related to the all careers approach.
Well, as far as general thoughts, there's obviously a huge green careers movement in the United States. Just talked to 3 of my friends out in Washington, D.C. who do this kind of work. And for those people who feel like they want to make a shift in their own career, there's a lot of opportunities for them to get information on green careers as they are presently understood, what kind of training they need, et cetera, et cetera. I do think that there's still a lack of even initial understanding, let alone then the content that everyone has to get, of saying, if you want to shift to a green career or make your career green, you have to start with environmental literacy, understanding how living systems work. And that's an area where I do think that if the environmental education community made an explicit offer to the world and said, as you think about shifting your careers, if you are a high school student or an adult, we have the knowledge of how the world works that we would love to share with you. And it is real important information. So that's quickly in a nutshell, I guess. So I'm definitely curious to see if anyone has been ruminating on this already. The new normals phrase is certainly out there. So what are people's thoughts on new normals?
This is Kristen Pritz. Can you hear me, folks?
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I would say our new normal is kind of sad and unfortunate in that most of our programs have been shut down right now. And I think what we're hoping for the fall is that we can work with our IT department to do some virtual presentations. So really in just the big picture of everything, we've had to shut down all of our programs. I do have to say our Broomfield Bird Club that we love dearly is they're continuing small group tours by sign up and doing some virtual presentations. And so that's a completely separate nonprofit from the city, but a group that we certainly appreciate. So just to give you an idea of what's going on in Broomfield, that's kind of where we are right now. Mm-hmm. But I'm enjoying hearing all these ideas. Thank you.
This is Betsy. And for me, the new normal is not normal. It's new, but it's not normal because we are asked to think even more fully about how to bring all people of every race, creed, ethnicity, experience into our programs, which has primarily been in the past all people leading of the white race. And we need to grapple with that and work for equity and inclusion. And it's going to take all of us to do that.
Betsy, I'll let you and everyone know that last night we had a program at our outdoor classroom open space, which was called Sharing Our Cultural Conservation Stories. And we made a point to invite as wide a variety of folks in Lafayette, generationally and racial, ethnic. And the storm clouds gathered, and despite the fact that it was already raining, 25 of the 30 registrants showed up and were sitting on the bleachers. We started the program, and then it started lightning within half a mile of us. And we scurried to our cars, and then it started raining harder, and we had to cancel it. But the show of interest in this was just amazing. And we fully intend this to be part of this new outdoors movement. In other words, let's all come together around creating a new world that's, of course, much more just and inclusive, and at the same time, not a separate goal. At the same time, sustainable. You know, let's all go in good directions together.
Martin, it's Kristen again. Could you describe a little bit how you handled that program and how people were involved with the discussion and so on? That sounds really cool.
Well, like I say, it did get canceled after 2 minutes, but we're going to reschedule. But the way that we did it
I missed that part. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. But the plan was very open-ended and informal after a few formal introductory things. And the outdoor classroom normally could hold about 60, 70 people, but with social distancing and people sitting in chairs around the side, we had 30 people. And so we were in a kind of a roundish. And the idea was just to say, hey, my grandmother did things this way. In the country I come from, we do this to save our resources or to enjoy ourselves or whatever. And yeah, just a kind of a popcorn style, what is the wisdom that our backgrounds and cultures could share?
Kristen, we reached out to and were engaged by our senior services committee, as well as our Human Rights Commission, and we had some partners to help us engage people for this conversation that didn't happen last night. And, a couple of the things that you talked about earlier, some things that Martin and I have been able to do in lieu of programming currently is we pushed out 3 to 4 videos now, Martin, maybe about to put out our latest one on native plants and how you can incorporate those into your landscapes. So we're trying to still engage our community, even though we're not having a lot of live in-person programming. Although we are starting that up now. We have some places like the outdoor classroom, we can do it outside and social distance well. But just wanted to give you maybe another idea there is push out some videos if you have the bandwidth. Well, you can hire somebody to do that. It was relatively inexpensive for us to use a student from Centaurus High School, graduate from Centaurus, to put out a 7-minute video for under $1,000.
Thanks. Those are great ideas.
I did see another question in the chat from Betsy about, with your focus on green careers, are you partnering with seniors 65 and older in your community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was going to both answer that and riff on it a little bit here to try to get across the overall point a little more too. We've already been working with the Senior Advisory Board and the Senior Center a lot over the last few years, so that already existed. And so when we reached out to them to support this event, they were happy to do so. With the Green Careers itself, I've actually done, again, these programs not only for high schools and middle schools, but the local community. And I find that there's quite a few seniors that come, a lot in our case for this program, from the huge Anthem development up in Broomfield. So Kristen, they're coming from Broomfield to see this all careers thing. And we haven't been able to yet, mesh these gears extremely well, but I see this huge looming body of expertise out there that both want to figure out how to do things more green with everyone else, but offer their life experience of their own careers, maybe even how they did things wrong. I actually spoke to a number of people up there going, oh, I was in this career and I'm kind of glad I'm out of it. We were really doing things that are not sustainable and so forth. And hey, I'd love to share that with others so they don't repeat our mistakes. But the whole idea of intergenerational linkage here and trying to be more relevant in EE, I think is a huge area to be tapped.
Well, that could be a great area for us to partner with Lafayette on, because the Anthem Ranch community is so active. I was just emailing somebody this morning in that group about cycling, and so I agree with you. There's a lot of energy and knowledge in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So maybe Rob and Martin and Pete and I can talk a little more about that.
Yeah.
How we could help with what you're saying.
Yeah, and not too off in the future, the butterfly pavilion is going to be moving over that way, and the pollinator districts being developed. So there seems to be a lot of opportunity in the future there to partner with y'all.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the areas that I feel like this all careers thing, but also the general premise of EE becoming more relevant to the economy, it has potential for also, is one of the very few ways in which our political divide can be bridged. And, everyone, whether they use the same words or not, wants the best for their kids. They want to have them be part of what would be a vibrant economy, however that ends up looking, a good economy that's healthy. And they also want, the best for the world of the future. They may not state it in the same way, but I've had some really interesting discussions with people that you might think would be diametrically opposed to more emphasis on environmental education. But then when we start saying, let's apply it to the economy, suddenly can open up a little bit and have dialogue. So I might put Jerry on the spot, if that's okay, Jerry. Jerry is, and you can chat this out if you want, whatever you prefer, is a retired Lafayette citizen who attended a webinar that we specifically had on all careers by itself, and then contacted me, and he wanted to be part of being able to get the word out a lot through our new educational mini station there, but in other ways too. And he and I just had another email exchange this morning. And Jerry, do you have anything to add?
Good morning. Boy, there's just so much to talk about, but and I didn't read your email yet. I saw it, but I think a key point that I want to get across is that our literacy should be much more than just environmental. It needs to focus, try to educate people on society and how it works, how decision making is made. Kids need to understand that we live in a very big world, very diverse world, and connect all the pieces. So I've been writing some pieces, not so much on companies at least to this point, but on various careers, and maybe make them into posters, maybe write a little primer of some kind, but how a lot of careers are going to have environmental elements to them. But anyway, it's a very, very broad field, environmental education. You have to have a literate, well-read society that understands what our broader problems are. Anyway, I can go on forever, but I'm writing all kinds of pieces about different career paths, such as being a policy analyst. A key point of Martin is that there are so many jobs that are not the traditional environmental jobs. I was an environmental engineer scientist for 40 years. And there's all kinds of those types of jobs. But being a business owner, you have a lot of environmental responsibilities, big or small business. In so many fields, you're touching on environment. Whether you're an economist, a public administrator, so many areas, you always have to be thinking about the environment. I'm going to leave it there, but unless you have some questions, but yeah, it's a huge field when you look beyond just environmental in quotes.
So sometimes when we do actual programs for, say, a high school, I use the case study of interface carpet. And I don't know how many of you all know that one already, but the reason it's compelling to me is that the carpet business was and still is just hugely polluting, and 95% still of carpet goes into landfills and they use noxious chemicals. Well, 30 years ago, one company, Interface, and you've probably seen their carpet squares instead of wall to wall, said, first of all, let's make carpet squares. So if one part gets damaged, we don't have to replace the whole doggone carpet. And much more importantly, they exhaustively studied chemicals so they could make their materials entirely recyclable. So at the end of the life of the carpet, you take it back to the company and they make new carpet out of it. And that was all started by their CEO, a business owner, who said he had to be responsible to his grandkids and find a way to not basically ruin the earth for them. And so he worked with William Mcdonough, and William Mcdonough is a architecture dean at the University of Virginia. But he has 3 environmental principles, he says. One is use daily incoming solar energy, use renewable energy. Second is waste equals food. You know, so just think of a design process where we never ever can be allowed to create waste. It has to be preordained to be useful for something else. So when you even just start with those 2, you say any business can study, you know, even their local natural surroundings and really get a firm, in-depth grip on how those 2 principles alone are hugely important, and start to design what they do using that. And to cultivate that mindset, then suddenly environmental educators in that community become much more relevant, much more part of that process, because they're creating the intuition and mindset and knowledge base that's going to continue to do that into the future.
Martin, did you see this question in the chat? It's a good one. How can we help others see the environmental in their own careers or career paths?
Let me zoom down to that. How do we see help others see the environmental? Well, that's even more basic than all this, I think, and that's where Richard Louv, he talks about the 21st century story. right now, our story is, I would argue, is growth. Growth for growth's sake. I would argue that that is our society's story. And so everything we do is in service of that. Think how we elect our elected officials and everything. It needs to be supplanted with another story that says we are a seamless continuum of a living planet. And then once you even go there, you're already immediately, everything is quote unquote environmental, or even deeper. Everything is alive. It's not separated into environmental or human. It's everything is alive together. And, you know, when I first moved out here to Colorado, I thought that the theme that I developed out east near Washington, D.C., that of the Gaia paradigm, the idea of Earth as a single living system and us as a seamless continuum of it, would resonate here in Boulder County. I was wrong. It's been really hard, and so I've almost abandoned it for the time being as a primary message, because it doesn't seem to resonate with people. And yet, even Richard Louv refers to it. It's part of his 21st century story. And so if we can, in fact, return to that and bring it into the mix and connect it with our sense of what it means to be alive and have a career to begin with, we'll be even further along. But my own assessment right now is that we need to move so quickly that we need to start right in on high school students and their view of careers. Otherwise, we just keep replicating the same economy over and over and over. But somewhere along the line, we need to change that story, and it goes right to your question, at least.
Martin, can I add to that?
What's that?
Can I add to that, please?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
This is Jerry Kelly. I'm even throwing my photo on me. But one thing I want to build on is environmental justice. So we've, in the environmental field, have always worked with environmental justice because we have understood that we know where the pollution ends up in these communities of lower income, whether they're along highways or located next to industry. But that's going to be an area that is talked about a lot when you talk about Black Lives Matter. Environmental justice is really big. When you look at the impact of COVID and climate change, that's all related to environmental justice. And going back to the question that was just asked about how do companies get involved in environmental. All big companies in the past had to write an environmental, financial, and social responsibility report once a year to their shareholders. I think now it's been truncated to be just social responsibility. So CEOs have to address the whole concept of social responsibility, which includes environmental. What does my company do every year in terms of this? Do we pay our workers enough? Do we take care of our environment? What are we really doing without greenwashing? And how do we contribute to the economy of our community, of our state? And that's what I was trying to get at before. They're all related. It all comes down to having a better society, a better environment. Anyway, that was my inject.
Yeah, and I just would add that, Hillary, one thing you might have seen on one of the slides, we sit the youth corps down now each year when they come in, give them some soda pop and candy and take them to the air conditioning in the library and do a little session with them. And we talk about, environmental literacy in all careers, and we set them loose. And before you know it, they're drawing up matrix on the desk about how each career is connected. and what environmental impacts each career has. So to get that conversation started with our young people in this community, we think will help us for the future, we hope. And one other quick point, here in Lafayette, we tried to roll out a green purchasing plan this year, and we've come to find out that it's just going to be more of a guiding document until, well, what happened is when people like myself and the other managers went out to do some purchasing, we come to find out that our vendors don't even know where their products are sourced half the time. So until we get to the point where businesses are learning more and doing more as far as, where they're sourcing their products and their knowledge about, environmental sustainability, it's hard for us to even enact a green purchasing policy, but we're trying to get there here in Lafayette. But the industry just hasn't gotten up to where we're trying to be just yet. And we're hoping having those conversations with these businesses, getting more on board and understanding that if you do the right things, we're going to be buying from you in the future. If not, you're going to be left in the dark. So we're hoping to move that initiative forward with the businesses we do purchasing with in the future.
I'd like to add just a very, very quickly, we need to break the myth that spending money on the environment is counter to the business bottom line. You can increase the bottom line by being good environmental stewards.
And I think Lori has a question. We've got just about 4 minutes left.
Oh, sorry about that. Hi, Lisa, Martin, everybody. Good to see you. I was on a meeting yesterday, and a gal said that the Denver parks and the maintenance people are injecting the trees so they don't grow so fast, so they don't have to trim them. And does anybody know? I don't know. That sounds pretty crazy.
Maybe they're injecting them for the emerald ash borer protection. That's what I would guess. I've never heard of anyone using growth regulators to slow the growth of a tree, but hey.
That's what she said. Well, I guess I should contact the Denver Park.
I think Katie had a question.
Yeah, Martin, thanks.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it on. You can't see my video, so you can't see my little guy squirming around in the background, though you may hear him. I'm in Lafayette, and I have the privilege of working with Martin and Rob as a member of the Open Space Citizen Advisory Committee, as well as in my free time, I'm an educator and natural history artist, and I have a painting in front of me I'm going to try not to spill on right now. I just want to speak in support of this All Careers initiative for a moment and kind of to connect some things Jerry was saying to this bigger picture. I think that oftentimes as environmental educators, we have really well-intentioned methods that unfortunately sometimes can go to support this belief and myth that wildlife management, environmental management is a matter of having better science about the environment or about the wildlife that we're working to manage, and that it's not about the people. And one thing that I think that the All Careers initiative can help to do is to dispel that myth and, to Jerry's point, really connect people back to the environment and to this new 21st century story of ourselves. So yeah, I would just encourage all of us to try to think about the ways that the environmental education that we're each practicing is going to support or dispel this myth that the environment is something outside of us, and that more science will help us understand it better, and therefore will inherently be better managers of it. And instead, we're intricately connected to this. And so anyway, I think that that's this huge asset of the All Careers approach to our field more broadly.
Great, thank you. And I know we're right at noon, but Martin and Rob, do you have any final thoughts for folks?
Rob?
I just appreciate the conversation. We're always looking to gain knowledge here in Lafayette, and seeing a lot of familiar faces. It's great to see you all again. I wish more you showed your face. And what's going on with you?
Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Mark?
Well, I'll just echo the same. It's the conversation, getting it started, that I most wanted to do. Definitely wanted to share our case study, but in service of, maybe we can continue this kind of conversation, because we need to become more relevant.
Great, and I will send out Martin and Rob's contact information, if that's okay, to the group when I send a follow-up email, probably in the next few days. I'll send the recording and an evaluation survey we'd love for you to complete, just to help us continue to improve our webinars and offerings. But yeah, just a lot of gratitude for everyone's time today and the great conversation, and to Martin and Rob for leading it for us. But everyone have a great rest of your day, and we hope that we could see you on at a future CAE event.
Great.
And stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rob and Martin. Lisa.
Welcome. Bye all.